Good morning or good afternoon. Welcome to my presentation for the Gendlin Symposium. My name is Emanuela Galanti, and I am a philosopher and focusing trainer based in Rome, Italy. Let's go right away in presentation mode so that I can share the whole screen. The title of the paper and of the presentation is A Process Model as a Model and as a Theory of Evolution. I will focus though only on the first part, the model. The first element of the model is the premise. It is found right away at the beginning of the text, but it gets changed after a while. Gendlin first says it as body and environment are one, but only in certain respects. But then he goes into the second form, body and environment number two imply each other. They are both ambiguous statements, and they have to be ambiguous in order to build complexity and clarity out of this premise. But the first one does not have the technical term imply. You cannot start right away with a technical term like imply is. So that's why first we get the premise in the first form. But also, if you get rid of but only in certain respects, you get a premise that it's really a sort of mathematical equation between body and environment. And if they are one, if they are equal, then you get only one term. You don't go anywhere with one term. You cannot build a model above it, as Gendlin is going to do, or down from it. You need at least three terms to have a small deductive system like in Aristotle's syllogistic. So implies a term from logic, but Gendlin doesn't want to use it between propositions. He wants to use it between terms. Because the way it is used, it can come to mean that the conclusion was already in the premises, so hidden in the premises, already there. And this is the model of knowledge that Gendlin does not want to support, that is not his philosophy. His logic is a logic of terms, like in steps 11 and 12 of thinking at the edge in the standard format. But again, you can get to it only if you have enough terms to tie them, to cross them. So before going to predication, you have to have another schema, and Gendlin applies what is called the two schema that has the logical form A equal non A. From process, how you go back to process through stoppage of process. You first stop the process and then you put it back again. And that's why Gendlin calls it a detour, because you go back, but after you have built something out of the stopped process. And what you get in the first application of the schema is the concept of transitional object, and later on, the concept of leaving from stop-ons. Once you have enough complexity here, complexity of the complex events, either beings and the functional cycle, then you can get to behavior, from behavior to culture, and then to focusing. Complexity in behavior and culture is not to be represented, in my opinion. That's the point, that the implicit cannot be represented. But what I'm going to say is that there is an implicit reference to the theory of types of Principia Mathematica of Russell and Whitehead in the way the model is being built, and also the semantics of possible words that had Carnap and who was a teacher in Chicago University, exactly at McKeon, Gendlin's teacher of philosophy was, and Kripke. So you get this mesh of implied or mesh of possible versions of actuality that is going to be the space and then culture as a system of situations. Let's come then now to the object, transitional object built by the continued implying that the body does of the missing aspects. When the process stops, the body continues to imply the missing aspect. And out of this proto-symbolization, he builds a transitional object. The idea of the transitional object is a crossing between three different theories of permanent object, a very important crossing that we see at work throughout the model, from Whitehead, Piaget, and Winnicott. Whitehead, Gendlin gets the idea that process comes first and permanent of objects is built from stopping the process. And also the idea of felt sense, that reality is available there for feeling, and it promotes feeling. From Piaget, very important in the concept of the permanent object is that the child builds it when it is about 18 months old from movements and from a process of trials and errors to get to it. Because perception is not there at the beginning, it's not developed enough, according to Piaget, to allow for a direct perception of a hidden object like he does when he experiments with his three children on this and the other stages of child development. And that's a very important idea for Gendlin, because he will build the concept of stable object later on from this idea of the motor or behavioral schemata that are in the body. And the third concept, of course, is that of transitional object or transitional space from the British psychiatrist and psychoanalyst Donald Winnicott. From object relation theory, it is an object that helps in separation from the caregiver, but also prevents a too early intrusion of the real world into the imaginary and fantastic world of the child. So the transitional space is a creative space that also in adult life will be very important to access, as, for example, Gendlin in the eighth chapter of the book, when he has focusing as leading to a creative space where one can be instance of himself or herself. Therefore, from there, we see that the third element of the model is not one conclusion. There are many possible pathways to go. And that is what really the explication model that Gendlin is being used is all about. The model doesn't want to explain things, doesn't want to explain facts. He wants to explicate from implying, and so give not facts, but possible scenarios, possible worlds. It's a right way to put it. But I say that explanation, which is referred to in what is called the deductive nomological model for scientific theories, is also very much basic to human experiencing. And it's not something that is used only in the unit model. It was used, for example, in Greek myths. We see here in the myth of Proserpina and the daughter and the mother Demeter. The mother rejoices after the rape of the daughter because after an agreement with Zeus, she can get it back for 6 months and then rejoice and give flowers and crops to the people on earth. So the myth explains the change in seasons. I put forth a small deductive argument to explain why and how, in my opinion, proto-symbolizing works, and I get it from a Greek notion of symbolizing, which is also implied in what Gendlin says in the stage where he says that implying is a rudimentary kind of symbolizing. The idea is that when Plato's Symposium, Plato in the Symposium puts forth his account of love, he was referring to a practice that two friends or family members or also allied towns had to throw together something that was still united, a piece of pottery, so that when they would meet again, they would be able to recognize each other. So the proto-symbolizing, in my opinion, has this power to give you back something that belongs to your essence and that is not alienated from culture the way the symbol that stands for something else is. The theory of evolution, going to the last part of the paper and very quickly here, is the idea that the process of life begins with symbiosis and that the first step in adaptation to the environment is coping with the separation from the caregiver, as we have seen in the transitional object idea, and that the plants and microorganisms do the same with the sun. There is also a reference to, not explicit, but clear enough, to Lynn Margulis and the idea that natural selection is not able to explain how new forms come about. And Lynn Margulis was the theorist that starting in the 70s was had put forward this, the idea of endosymbiosis that is now corroborated for the first forms of life. And what I would like to add shortly is that the idea of evolution that Gendlin does is not as optimist as one may think. He mentions several times the dramatic scenarios and the possibility that the animal might die and the species might become extinct. So if you have time and if you want to do that, if you haven't seen it yet, go and look at the David Attenborough documentary series. The part that is called Frozen World, with the scene of the wall roses falling from a cliff, which seems a terrible way to confirm that the body is a function of the environment, and when the environment changes too quickly, the body is not able to record, doesn't have enough time to come with a next right step. Very few references here for the paper, and I want to end with this. You do not need to have read Plato to turn to the sun like a plant does. However, you need to be able to imagine what it would be like to be a primeval cyanobacterium waiting for the sun to return in order to read a process model and make the most of it. Thank you. And I hope you enjoyed my presentation. If you want to contact me, you have my email address here below.